A brutal winter storm, a lonely woman on the Texas plains, and a baby left to die in the snow. One fearless act of kindness will bring an unexpected reckoning that no one could imagine. This is a story of courage, mercy, and a moment that changed lives forever. Like, share, and subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. Now, let's get started. The winter of 1872 arrived early on the Texas plains, harsher than anyone remembered. Snow fell thick and fast, swallowing fences, trails, and even sound itself. Sarah Whitmore stood at the doorway of her small wooden cabin, pulling her shawl tighter as the wind howled like a wounded animal. She was a widow of 2 years, living alone since fever had taken her husband. Each winter day was a battle for survival, and this storm felt different, angrier, more dangerous. Still, Sarah focused on securing her home, unaware that fate was already moving toward her through the snow. By midday, the blizzard had grown so fierce that even the sky vanished into white darkness. Sarah worked quickly, tying down loose boards and stacking firewood close to the door. Just as she turned back inside, a strange sound reached her ears. It was faint, almost lost beneath the wind, but unmistakably human. She paused, heart pounding, listening again. The sound came once more, a weak cry, fragile and desperate. Fear battled instinct. No one should be outside in this storm. Yet the cry came again, pulling her forward against all reason. Sarah wrapped herself in a thick coat and stepped into the blizzard. Each step felt like pushing through ice and knives. She followed the sound beyond her cabin, toward a shallow dip in the land where snow had piled high. There, partially buried and barely moving, lay a small bundle wrapped in torn buckskin. When Sarah brushed away the snow, she gasped. Inside was a baby dark-haired, his skin pale with cold, lips trembling. He could not have been more than a few months old. Without thinking, Sarah lifted him, pressing him against her chest. The child was burning cold, his tiny body stiff and frighteningly still. Sarah turned back toward the cabin, forcing her legs to move as the storm fought her every step. Her arms ached, lungs burned, and fear whispered that she would fall and never rise again. But she refused. She had lost too much already. At last, she burst through her cabin door and slammed it shut, collapsing beside the fire. She stripped away the baby's frozen wrappings and wrapped him in warm blankets, rubbing his hands and feet until he let out a weak cry. For hours. Sarah stayed by the fire, feeding the baby warmed milk drop by drop, terrified he might not survive the night. As color slowly returned to his face, her shaking hands finally steadied. Only then did she notice the beadwork stitched into the buckskin symbols she recognized from whispered warnings and frontier stories. The child was Comanche. Fear crept into her chest like ice. Helping a Comanche baby could mean death if warriors came searching. Many settlers had vanished for less. Yet as the baby slept against her arm, Sarah knew she would not regret saving him. The storm raged through the night, trapping Sarah and the child inside the cabin. She whispered prayers she had not spoken since her husband died, begging for mercy and forgiveness. She wondered how the baby had been lost. Had his mother fallen? Had the tribe been forced to flee the storm? Each possibility tightened her heart. She checked on him constantly, afraid his breathing might stop. When dawn finally came, the world outside lay buried under silence and snow. Sarah stared out the frost-covered window, knowing the storm had changed her life forever. On the second day, the blizzard weakened, though the cold remained unforgiving. Sarah melted snow for water and shared her limited food without hesitation. The baby watched her with dark, curious eyes, calmer now, stronger. She spoke softly to him, though he could not understand her words. She told him about the plains, the storms, and the loneliness that shaped people out here. She did not name him, afraid that giving him a name would bind her heart too tightly. Still, she felt an unfamiliar warmth growing inside her, something close to hope. Asterisk, yet fear never left her thoughts. She watched the horizon constantly, half expecting riders to appear at any moment. She knew Comanche warriors were relentless when searching for their own. Stories said they punished settlers without mercy. Sarah prepared herself for every outcome. She kept her rifle nearby, though she doubted she could ever use it while holding a child. At night, sleep came in fragments, broken by dreams of pounding hooves and shadows outside her door. Asterisk, by the third morning, the sky cleared into a sharp, endless blue. The storm had passed, leaving the land eerily still. Sarah stepped outside, scanning the frozen plains. Tracks were half buried, impossible to read. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the child's people might be searching, following signs she could not see. She returned inside and packed extra blankets around the baby. Her heart felt heavy, torn between relief that he was alive and dread of what his survival might bring. Asterisk, as the sun climbed higher, Sarah noticed movement far in the distance. At first, she thought it was another trick of light across the snow. But then she saw it clearly, dark shapes moving in a line. Horses, many of them. Her breath caught in her throat. She counted until fear made numbers meaningless. Dozens more than she could imagine. The ground itself seemed to tremble as they drew closer. Sarah knew, without doubt, that the Comanche had come. Asterisk, her hands shook as she lifted the baby, holding him close. Every lesson of frontier survival told her to hide, to run, to protect herself first. But she did neither. She stood in the center of her cabin, staring at the door, heart pounding so loudly she thought it might give her away. Whatever happened next, she knew she would face it honestly. She had saved a life in the storm. Now she would face the consequences when the storm returned, this time on horseback.
The sound of hooves grew louder with every heartbeat. Sarah stood frozen inside her cabin, the baby pressed gently against her shoulder. The child stirred, sensing the tension in the air. Through the small window, she saw them clearly, now Comanche warriors riding in a wide formation, their horses strong and disciplined. They moved with purpose, not chaos. Snow crunched beneath their hooves as they surrounded the cabin, stopping just beyond rifle range. Sarah's mouth went dry. She had prepared herself for fear, but the stillness was worse. No shouting, no arrows. Just silence heavy enough to crush her breath. Asterisk, a single rider dismounted and stepped forward. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his face lined with authority and grief. Sarah knew without being told this was the child's father or someone close enough to carry that pain. The baby whimpered softly, and the sound broke the silence like glass. Sarah took a slow breath, opened the cabin door, and stepped outside. Cold air bit her skin, but she did not retreat. Every eye turned toward her. She could feel their judgment, their caution, their restrained fury, all aimed at one woman, standing alone in the snow. Asterisk, Sarah held the baby out, arms trembling but steady enough to show her intent. She did not speak. Words felt useless between worlds that shared no language. The child reached out instinctively, fingers grasping the air. A low murmur passed through the warriors. The man stepped closer, eyes fixed on the baby's face. When he finally took the child into his arms, something in his posture broke. His shoulders sagged and he pressed his forehead gently to the baby's, breathing deeply as if confirming the child was real and alive. Asterisk, for a long moment, nothing happened. Then the man looked at Sarah not with hatred, but with a sharp, searching gaze. He studied her worn coat, her pale face, the frost clinging to her hair. He spoke in a low voice she could not understand, but the tone was clear. He was asking why. Sarah placed a hand over her heart and gestured toward the cabin, then to the snow-covered plains beyond. She mimed holding the baby, shivering, nearly lifeless. Compassion, she hoped, was a language all humans shared. The man nodded slowly. He turned and spoke to the others. Weapons lowered. Tension eased just enough for Sarah to breathe again. Another warrior approached, older, his eyes wise and calm. He held out a small carved object, a piece of bone etched with symbols. Sarah hesitated, then accepted it. The older man pressed his hand briefly to his chest. Then to hers, respect, gratitude, protection. She felt her knees weaken as the weight of survival finally settled in her bones. The baby began to cry again, healthy and strong now. His father rocked him gently, whispering words meant only for him. Sarah watched, emotions twisting painfully inside her. She felt relief, pride, and a quiet sorrow she had not expected. For 3 days, that child had filled the empty space in her heart left by loss. She had known from the start he was not hers to keep, yet part of her wished selfishly that the storm had never ended. She pushed the thought away, ashamed but honest enough to feel it. The Comanche chief stepped forward once more. He pointed toward Sarah's cabin, then to the horizon, then back to her. He spoke slowly, deliberately. Though she understood none of the words, the meaning came through clearly. As long as she lived on this land, no harm would come to her from his people. The storm had taken many things from them, but it had also revealed something rare: mercy where there was usually only bloodshed. Sarah nodded, tears freezing on her lashes before she could stop them. The warriors mounted their horses with the same quiet discipline they had arrived with. Before leaving, the chief turned back one last time. He raised his hand, palm open, then closed it into a fist over his heart. Sarah mirrored the gesture. The wind picked up slightly as the group rode away, their figures growing smaller against the endless white plains. When they finally disappeared beyond a low ridge, the world felt impossibly empty. The danger was gone, but so was the warmth that had briefly filled her lonely cabin. Sarah stood there long after they vanished, until the cold forced her inside. The cabin felt different now, too quiet, too still. She placed the carved token on the small table near her bed. It seemed to glow in the firelight, a reminder that kindness could echo far beyond fear. That night she slept deeper than she had in years. Dreams filled not with loss, but with the sound of a child's breathing and hooves fading peacefully into the distance. In the weeks that followed, life slowly returned to its harsh routine. Neighbors whispered when they heard the story, some calling Sarah brave, others foolish, but no one doubted its truth. Travelers reported Comanche riders passing nearby without hostility, guarding the area instead of threatening it. Sarah felt their presence, sometimes watchful, distant, protective. She worked her land with renewed purpose, knowing she was no longer truly alone, even if no one stood beside her. Spring eventually softened the plains, melting snow into rivers of life. Sarah planted her garden and repaired her cabin, the carved symbol always close. She never saw the baby again, but she often wondered about him, if he remembered warmth in the storm, if his life would one day brush against hers again in some unseen way. She had saved him without expecting reward. Yet in doing so, she had saved something inside herself, a belief that even in the cruelest winters, humanity could still choose mercy.